well, particularly in that case, by the time you're there, you're not fighting. You know, by the time you're here, you're trying to develop a system, and you're not fighting against it. You're there voluntarily. So in a way, it is a little bit of a departure also from some of these other systems that are really about forcing yourself to be a certain place. And these are more, in a way, about trying to understand where you are and trying to develop a system to help explain where you are.
Well, that makes sense, the way that you I mean, I think to the extent to which the tank's not there, but I see this work as so site-specific because this feels like a tank, right? Like, so, like, there's a way in which the ground or the reference that Andre is asking you about, like, just gets transposed onto the space that now we're all occupying together. I mean, it's kind of like you were saying earlier, you want someone to project themselves into this. You actually projected us all into the tank with you to a certain extent by suspending that, by, you know, joining in with these other two pieces and, like, you know, asking you where you are right now. Like, so kind of, it stops being a room and it starts being a tank. It starts being an ocean of air kind of thing, right? If you allow yourself to think along those lines, and I think we're directed to do that.
I was going to ask a really esoteric photo or history question, because you both brought up Muybridge, and I wonder if it's just a matter of locality. Because I actually thought about Thomas Aikens, because I think the difference between the two motion studies they were doing was Muybridge was, what is the body actually doing? Right. If it's a horse, are all the hooves touching? If it's a human, is it, you know, when does which foot hit the ground? Whereas with Aikens, it was more from an artist's standpoint of like, okay, but whatever it's doing, how is it doing that? Exactly what movement is happening at what moment? I don't care what it ends up doing, but what do the muscles do? It's almost like as if you were dissecting to figure it out, right? And so I guess the question is, which is the cart, which is the horse? Do you care what the thing's actually doing, or do you care more how it's happening?
And can I add to that?
Yes, please.
And how are you restraining it in that moment, right?
Yeah.
So, in other words, not only what is it doing, or how does it accomplish that thing, but what also restraints are you putting on it in doing that? So this one has less restraint, right?
Yeah.
It's allowing a certain kind of yeah, not only that, but a kind of free will that says I could hold my breath forever. I can't.
Yeah.
But or not, or I could drown.
Yeah.
And that becomes my mechanical choice.
Yeah. I mean, I was really drawn to Muybridge, particularly with just this idea. It seemed very much like the scale about this, trying to apply a rational system to manage something that you don't understand. And so in that, I think it was how do I turn to this vocabulary to nurse me through what I don't understand. And so in that way, it's this kind of strange, obsessive journey to try and understand. And so I'm not sure I'm answering all of these questions with that.
There were like 6 questions. You don't have to.
Yeah.
There were a lot of questions.
Yeah, there are. But when it's an interesting juxtaposition that you make, right? Because they're both using this technology to help understand something. But I think in the case of, I've always thought about that in terms of Muybridge, and perhaps it's because of the site specificity. Muybridge worked here. He did a lot of his early kind of motion photography here in San Francisco. But you know, Muybridge wanted to know what the camera could do. I think more than Eakins. Like Eakins wanted to use the camera to figure out what the body's potentiality was, whereas I think the thing that kind of distinguishes them from me is the extent to which Muybridge wanted to know what the camera's cap, like how much information could the camera provide. And you know, to that end, I think there is something about it's a little more, maybe not more or less. I think you can read it either way, so I don't think it's right or wrong. But if we choose to read this in terms of Muybridge, which is the way I've been prone to read it for the last week or two, so, what happens is the camera becomes front and center, and like you start to destabilize the extent to which we're talking about sculpture versus photography, this versus that. If Eakins is in the foreground, then all of a sudden this becomes an invitation to think about the life study. You know, and the bigger questions about spirituality, life, those boundaries, or whatnot. what's interesting, and this is what you do with your work by using really heavily loaded vocabularies and grammars, is it kind of depends on what you come to the image with to a certain extent. It's not predetermined. You've allowed us, this is that freedom I think you were talking about, a certain amount of interpretive freedom. You know,
I do think that the incorporation of the other works, or the elements of the work all together, leads you in a certain direction. Like, this is very much the product of the information gathered from the other two, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, I don't see Muybridge then going on to say, like, and now I'm going to make a multi-strapped thing to hold a horse into the proper posture for running, or what have you. I see Tom doing that, but I don't see him doing that. But like, they do end up leading through. So.
Right, so Kate, and I have a very special guest leader.
I guess I'm sort of thinking about many things at once, but two things that sort of I've been thinking about with other people's questions and I'm looking at and hearing is quackery. So these devices, right? I mean, you're making these devices to take measurements in the same way that things like algebra and long-form math and things strive to take what is nature and turn it into something that can be consumed by human comprehension, right? So you create these long math problems to sort of explain this universal phenomena, and sort of, I feel like you're creating these machinery or devices or what have you to sort of grapple with this ephemeral, natural phenomena. That as a human, your power of abstract thought wants to sort of, is naturally inclined to try to understand or interpret things that sort of exist in the universe. And then for some reason, I thought of sort of quackery or quack medical things, you know, these devices that'll cure this, or these things that'll guarantee this outcome. You know, I'm going to, you know, it's just an interesting thing to me. I don't know if you've thought about that side of this sort of like device mechanism that you're doing.
Yeah, that's kind of what brought me to the device mechanism. In fact, phrenology, one of the first ones, the head strap thing.
Head strap thing, yeah.
Was a piece that was called, let's see if I can remember now. It's called Device for Device for Fractured Beliefs.
Device for fractured beliefs.
So that was basically a traction device to hold your head in place exactly in relationship to where it is. And that had actually come out of another piece that was a phrenology modification piece. That was a bronze piece that I was working on.
Say that again.
Well, this new
phrenology
one, I thought about a piece for phrenology, phrenolic modification, and that was an extension on some of the urban globes that I was making that would fit onto the head, and then it had a device kind of like the plunger in a pinball machine, and you would pull it back. So if you weren't perhaps satisfied with your phrenology reading, and you could put this thing on and deliver a nice blow, and get a bump, you know, so you wanted to be more of this, so you put a bump on your skull.
That's where the explicitly political context of like a work like this would come out, right? Like, so, because I think that's where a lot of this desire to overlay certain kinds of human modes of ordering things or understanding things or knowing things bumps into the political in like a really big way. Phrenology in particular.
Can I add something to this? You have to remember, I've run this gallery for 50 years. And when the charming burglar came here with his temple, there was this mysterious person who came and went, and he was dying. Burglar was dying, and helped him. Who is this guy anyway? Who helps artists? And so I said to him, can you do a show here? We got the sarcophagus. Everybody said, what the hell is that? So Kat, who graduated from the Art Institute, lives out in our compound in Water Street. And Kat said, he's amazing. He helps all the artists, all the time. I thought, that's the guy I want to have here. So he did the show, and the most important part of the show was the Cioppino. No, wait till I tell his story. A bucket of Cioppino, this big. And all the students who graduated with him coming to dinner here. It was the most insane evening the gallery has ever had in 50 years. It was absolutely wonderful.
At least
And
three of those people are here.
Paula England had the gallery downstairs, and I said to Paula, I hate this. Can't run this damn thing anymore. Help me out. Paula said, Zach, you're not suited to loan the artists money, take them to dinner, talk about their divorces, and all the rest. You just can't do that. I mean, I said, you're right, I can't. So anyway, the Cioppino arrived in the middle of the Chinese New Year's, and the pot had to be carried for 8 blocks through and it appeared here, and there was the most wonderful dinner, incredible dinner, with all of the people who were graduating, led by the artist that puts this thing in here. Nothing will ever sell, right? I'm a gallery owner. Nothing will ever sell. Nothing ever has sold in this gallery. No kidding. No kidding. No, you can't even believe. How much does this gallery cost me in 50 years? $500,000. Well, did I pay for it? No, I have a whole bunch of tenants. Anyway, the Cioppino was delicious. And the camaraderie was funny as hell with lots of talking and stuff. So some months later, Vass and Rayner got thrown out of their gallery because they couldn't pay the rent. Okay, you guys, come over and have a show over here. Well, they're all connected to Tom. So suddenly we have more dinners and stuff. But I want to tell you, the best thing you could possibly do if you want to be an artist is run a gallery that makes no money, nobody comes to the openings, nothing ever sells, and you get something like tonight. Beautiful. And the best part of the gallery is the curator of the gallery is in Manhattan, not here. And she started out here, and she blah, blah, blah. Started the first women's gallery in Manhattan, and she doesn't bother me at all. I don't have a curator in my face. If I'm going to pick a guy that makes this stuff, I just pick him. Okay, that's my story.
So why don't we do this later? You had a question, and why don't you ask the final question, and then we can turn this into one of these moments of community, and we can all ask all the questions that we're thinking of. I think you should be the honored final question. Are you comfortable with that?
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know if it's quite the question to live up to that, but I just way back when you brought up the idea of the Muybridge photography series, I wanted to add on to that the idea that you mentioned with that, the use of camera and what can the camera do. I think my particular area of study in school was in film, and there's a large theory behind how when you take a photograph or when you make an image with a camera, you are choosing where the audience looks, and you are choosing what their eye is and what their gaze is. And there's a whole talk about directing that, and how whatever is in the photograph or in the image is then being controlled and is then being observed by the gaze. And as you mentioned with the idea of masculinity being kind of subverted, I think that brings up the idea of not even just the straps as being bondage or being security, but as these images that you have that are Muybridge-esque become controlled, and controlled within that, in that tank. It's a tank as well as it being an image boarded by the parameters of the photograph. And just to say on top of all of that, the thing I found, my question, if you will, was I thought it was particularly interesting that this is the time that you've chosen to incorporate photography, because in most of your pieces before, photography isn't heavily used, and I thought it was interesting that this was the time for that.